Jack Miller works 3 jobs just to keep food on the table for his young daughter in their small Oklahoma town. Life hasn't been easy since losing his wife, but he's always managed to get by. Then one stormy afternoon, everything changes. A massive tornado tears through their community, and Jack spots a woman trapped in her car directly in the twister's path. Without thinking twice, he risks his own life to save her. She disappears in the chaos that follows, leaving Jack to rebuild like everyone else. But 3 days later, a private jet lands at their tiny local airport. Could this mysterious woman be more than just another person he helped? And what happens when 2 worlds, his simple life and her world of wealth, collide? Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The old weather radio crackled softly in Jack Miller's kitchen as he studied the construction paper calendar hanging on his refrigerator. Emma's careful handwriting marked each day with Daddy's different jobs. Mechanic work highlighted in yellow, hardware store shifts in blue, and weekend handyman jobs dotted in green. His 8-year-old daughter had insisted on making it herself, wanting to know exactly when she'd see her father each day. "Emma, honey, time for breakfast." Jack called up the narrow staircase of their modest 2-bedroom home. The morning light filtered through worn curtains, catching dust motes in its beam. He could hear the familiar creak of Emma's bed, followed by her shuffling footsteps. The calendar had been Emma's project last month, sparked by a well-meaning teacher's assignment about parent occupations. While other kids drew single pictures, doctor, lawyer, teacher, Emma had needed 3 pages to show everything her daddy did. Jack's throat had tightened when she'd proudly presented it to him, her gap-toothed smile beaming. "Coming, Daddy!" Emma's voice carried down the stairs, followed by the thud of her backpack hitting each step. She appeared in the kitchen doorway, her dark hair wild from sleep, wearing the outfit she'd carefully laid out the night before, purple leggings and the butterfly t-shirt her grandmother had sent for her birthday. Jack slid a plate of eggs and toast across the worn Formica counter. "Eat up, princess. We've got exactly 18 minutes before we need to leave." He glanced at the calendar again, confirming today's schedule. Morning shift at Pete's auto shop, afternoon at Harrison's hardware, then picking up Emma from after-school care before she went to her grandmother's for his evening maintenance job. At the mall, Emma climbed onto the kitchen stool, her legs swinging. "I put a heart on Saturday," she said, pointing to the calendar with her fork, "because that's our special day. No jobs." Jack's chest tightened. He'd had to cancel their last 2 Saturday plans for emergency repair calls, but Emma had carefully drawn hearts on every weekend slot anyway. Her unflagging faith in him was both a blessing and a burden. "That's right, sweetheart. This Saturday is all ours." He crossed the kitchen and pressed a kiss to her head, breathing in the sweet smell of her strawberry shampoo. "Maybe we'll finally finish that puzzle." Emma wrinkled her nose. "The one with all the clouds?" "They all look the same. Just like your mama," Jack chuckled. "She never had the patience for puzzles either." The mention of Sarah slipped out naturally now, 3 years after the accident. Time hadn't healed the wound completely, but it had. Softened its edges, letting the happy memories surface more easily. Emma smiled at the comparison, then pointed to the radio. "Is it supposed to storm today?" Jack turned up the volume slightly, listening to the morning forecast. "Just some rain. Later, nothing to worry about." He'd developed a heightened awareness of weather patterns since Sarah's accident. The storm that had caused the multi-car pileup had seemed harmless too, until it wasn't. "I made sure to pack my rain boots," Emma said, polishing off her eggs. She hopped down from the stool and carried her plate to the sink, standing on tiptoe to rinse it. The morning sun caught her profile, and for a moment she looked so much like Sarah that Jack's heart skipped. He checked his watch. 12 minutes until they needed to leave. Just enough time to pack Emma's lunch and make sure she had everything. For her spelling test. The calendar caught his eye again, its cheerful colors masking the grueling schedule beneath. But Emma had made it beautiful. transforming his endless juggling act into something almost magical through her eyes. "Daddy?" Emma's voice pulled him from his thoughts. "Can we add sparkles to next month's calendar?" Jack smiled, reaching for her lunch bag. "Sure thing, Princess. Sparkles it is." He'd work 100 jobs, juggle 1,000 schedules if it meant keeping that light in her eyes. The calendar might show a life stretched thin, but to Emma, it was simply the story of how much her daddy loved her, and that made all the difference in the world. The morning rain had given way to an unsettling stillness by the time Jack started his shift at Pete's auto shop. The air felt heavy, charged with something more than just humidity. He paused while organizing his tools, glancing at the small box of photographs he kept in his workspace, water-damaged memories salvaged from his old house after Sarah's accident when he'd had to downsize. The corners were wrinkled, the colors slightly faded, but the faces remained clear. Sarah holding newborn Emma, their first Christmas in the old house. The camping trip where Emma had caught her first fish. "Miller!" Pete's gruff voice carried across the garage. "Got a customer for you. Lady says her car's making weird noises." Jack tucked the photos away and grabbed his diagnostic tablet. The woman standing by the sleek black Mercedes looked out of place in their small-town garage. Designer clothes, perfectly styled hair, the kind of confident posture that came from boardrooms rather than break rooms. "I'm Jack Miller," he said, approaching with his most professional smile. "What seems to be the problem?" She turned, and something in her eyes caught him off guard. A flash of vulnerability beneath the polished exterior. "Catherine Pierce," she replied, extending her hand. "It's making this strange rattling sound whenever I accelerate. I'm supposed to be heading back to Chicago this afternoon, and I can't afford any delays." Jack nodded, popping the hood. "Let's take a look. Mind starting her up for me?" As Catherine slid into the driver's seat, Jack noticed her hands shaking slightly. She was trying to hide it, but something had her rattled worse than any car trouble. It could explain. The engine purred to life, and Jack quickly identified the issue. A loose heat shield, nothing serious. As he worked, he kept glancing at the sky through the garage's open doors. The clouds were taking on that sickly greenish tinge that every Oklahoman learned to watch for. "Shouldn't take more than an hour to fix," he told Catherine, who'd been alternating between checking her phone and eyeing the darkening sky. "But ma'am, if I might suggest, you might want to delay your drive back. Weather's looking pretty serious." Catherine frowned at her phone. "I really can't. There's a board meeting tomorrow morning that I absolutely can't miss. My father—" She trailed off, then straightened her shoulders. "How much do I owe you?" Jack wiped his hands on a shop rag, studying her face. "Listen, we've got a storm shelter right here in the shop. At least wait until this system passes. Board meeting won't matter much if you end up driving into a tornado." A sudden gust of wind whipped through the garage, scattering papers and sending Jack's box of photos tumbling. Catherine instinctively knelt to help him gather them, pausing when she picked up a particular shot of Emma in her mother's arms. "Your family?" she asked softly, her businesslike demeanor cracking slightly. "My daughter and late wife," Jack said, carefully taking the photo. "Water damage from the storm that—" He stopped himself. "Just be careful out there, Ms. Pierce. Oklahoma weather doesn't care about board meetings." Their eyes met for a moment, and Jack saw something shift in her expression, recognition, perhaps, of the weight behind his words. But then her phone buzzed, and the wall went back up. "Thank you for the warning, Mr. Miller, but I'll take my chances." She handed him her credit card. "I'm used to navigating storms." As Jack processed her payment, the weather radio in the corner crackled to life with a tornado watch announcement. Catherine's hands trembled again as she signed the receipt, though she tried to cover it by adjusting her blazer. "At least take our number," Jack insisted, scribbling the shop's information on the back of her receipt. "If you run into trouble—" "I'll be fine," she said, but tucked the paper carefully into her purse. "Thank you." Jack watched her drive away, the Mercedes disappearing into the increasingly ominous afternoon. He returned to his workbench, picking up the photo she'd held. the one of Emma and Sarah. The water damage had created a strange pattern across the sky in the background, almost like a funnel cloud reaching down to earth. "Storm's building fast," Pete commented from the doorway. "Might want to call Emma's school, make sure they're implementing protocols." Jack was already reaching for his phone, unable to shake the feeling that this day was about to take a turn nobody was prepared for. The photos in their box seemed to watch him, damaged but enduring, silent witnesses to how quickly life could change in the face of nature's fury. The tornado warning sirens began their eerie wail just as Jack finished his call with Emma's school. They assured him the children were already in the underground shelter, but his daughter's voice echoed in his mind. "I made sure to pack my rain boots." Those innocent words now felt like a weight in his chest. "Everyone down!" Pete shouted as the wind suddenly intensified. The other mechanics rushed toward the shop's shelter. Jack was about to follow when movement caught his eye through the open garage door. A black Mercedes pulled over on the side of the road, hazard lights blinking helplessly against the darkening sky. "Catherine," he breathed, already moving. Pete's shout of protest was lost in the howling wind. The world had taken on an otherworldly green tinge. Debris pelted Jack's shoulders as he ran, his years of Oklahoma weather experience screaming that he had minutes, maybe seconds. The Mercedes engine was running, but the car wasn't moving. As he drew closer, he could see Catherine inside, hands gripping the steering wheel, frozen in terror as she stared at something in her rearview mirror. Jack followed her gaze, and his blood ran cold. The tornado had touched down, its massive funnel churning directly toward them. The roar was deafening now, like a freight train bearing down on them. He reached the car and yanked at the driver's door. Locked. He pounded on the window. "Catherine, you need to get out. Now!" She turned to him, eyes wide with panic. Her fingers fumbled with the controls, and the lock clicked open. Jack practically pulled her from the seat, noticing her hands were icy despite the humid air. "My phone," she gasped, reaching back toward the car. "The board meeting. Leave it!" Jack wrapped an arm around her waist, half dragging her toward the auto shop. Her designer heels stumbled on the uneven pavement. Without breaking stride, he swept her up into his arms. The wind tried to tear them sideways, but Jack leaned into it, his body remembering similar storms from his childhood. Something crashed behind them. The Mercedes, he realized, was now being lifted and tossed like a toy. Catherine's fingers dug into his shoulders as the sound of twisting metal filled the air. The shop's shelter entrance seemed impossibly far away. "We're not going to make it," Catherine whispered against his neck. Jack spotted the drainage ditch running alongside the road. It wasn't ideal, but it was their only chance. "Hold on tight," he ordered, adjusting his grip. She nodded, her face pressing into his chest as he half ran, half slid down the ditch's embankment. They landed hard at the bottom. Jack quickly positioned them so his body covered hers, pressing them as low as possible into the earth. The roar became all-consuming, and he felt Catherine trembling violently beneath him. "It's okay," he said, though she couldn't possibly hear him. "I've got you." He felt her nod against his chest, her fingers gripping his work shirt. The world exploded. Around them, Jack squeezed his eyes shut against the onslaught of debris, focusing on the simple task of keeping them anchored. Catherine's perfume, incongruously elegant in their muddy sanctuary, mingled with the raw scent of earth and rain. Time lost all meaning. It could have been minutes or hours that they lay there, hearts pounding in shared rhythm against the storm's fury. Then, gradually, the roar began to recede. Jack waited until he was certain the tornado had passed before carefully raising his head. The landscape had been transformed, trees stripped bare, buildings partially collapsed, cars tossed about like discarded toys. Catherine's Mercedes was nowhere to be seen. "Are you hurt?" he asked, easing his weight off her. Catherine blinked up at him, mud streaking her face, designer outfit ruined. Her hand went to her throat. "My necklace," she whispered. "My mother's pearls." Jack spotted something white in the mud nearby. He reached over and carefully extracted A broken strand of pearls, some still attached, others scattered in the dirt. Catherine took them with shaking hands, and something about the way she cradled the broken necklace made his chest ache. Sirens began to wail in the distance, emergency vehicles responding to the devastation. Catherine suddenly seemed to become aware of their position, their muddy embrace, the intimacy forced upon them by survival. She started to pull away, then swayed as shock set in. "Easy," Jack steadied her. "You might have a concussion. We need to get you checked out." "I can't," she said, but her voice lacked its earlier authority. "The meeting, my father, Catherine." Jack waited until she met his eyes. "You almost died. The meeting can wait." She stared at him for a long moment, something complicated playing across her face. Then her professional mask crumbled completely, and she began to shake with delayed terror and relief. Without thinking, Jack pulled her back against his chest, feeling her tears soak through his already wet shirt. "Thank you," she whispered. You saved my life." Jack held her, aware that something profound had shifted between them in that drainage ditch, something that had nothing to do with class or status or board meetings. The broken pearls, clutched in her hand, caught the emerging sunlight, their scattered pieces glinting like stars fallen to earth. Above them, the sky was already beginning to clear, as Oklahoma's skies always did after a storm. But Jack knew that some things, once changed by a tornado's touch, never quite returned to what they were before. The Pine Grove Gazette lay open on Jack's kitchen table, its front page dominated by photos of the tornado's destruction. Between bites of hastily made toast, he scanned the article for the third time that morning. The story mentioned acts of heroism and miraculous rescues, but nothing about a woman in a Mercedes or a ditch that had become a sanctuary. Catherine Pierce had vanished in the chaos of emergency responses and community coordination, leaving behind only a broken strand of pearls that now sat in Jack's kitchen drawer. "Daddy, we're going to be late," Emma called from the living room, where she was stuffing emergency supplies into her backpack. The school had reopened, but every parent had been asked to send their children with extra water and non-perishable snacks, just in case. Jack folded the newspaper carefully, his eyes lingering on a quote from the mayor about community spirit. The town was already rebuilding, neighbors helping neighbors, strangers becoming friends over shared generators and bottled water. But something felt unfinished, like a puzzle missing its central piece. "Coming, princess." He grabbed his keys, trying to ignore the memory of Catherine trembling in his arms. The emergency responders had insisted on checking her over, but in the flurry of activity that followed, she'd slipped away. He didn't even know if she'd made it to Chicago, if she'd faced her father's disappointment over the missed board meeting, if she ever found the rest of those scattered pearls. The drive to Emma's school took longer than usual, detours routing, them around fallen trees and repair crews. Emma pressed her face against the window, taking in the changed landscape. "Mr. Wilson's house looks like a giant stepped on it," she observed solemnly. "Did anyone get hurt in the tornado, Daddy?" Jack thought of Catherine's wide eyes in that moment before he'd pulled her from the car. Some scrapes and bruises, but everyone made it to shelter in time. "We're good at tornadoes here in Oklahoma." "Did you save anyone?" Emma's question was innocent, but it made Jack's chest tighten. "Just helped where I could, sweetheart." He pulled up to the school drop-off line. "Remember, Grandma's picking you up today. I've got extra shifts helping with repairs." Emma nodded, then suddenly threw her arms around his neck. "I'm glad you're okay, Daddy. I was scared when they said there was a tornado." Jack held her close, breathing in her familiar strawberry shampoo scent. "I'm always coming home to you. Princess. That's a promise." After dropping Emma off, Jack headed to the auto shop. The garage had suffered minimal damage, but the lot was full of storm-damaged vehicles waiting for assessment. Pete was already there, coffee in hand, reading his own copy of the Gazette. "Made the paper," Pete said by way of greeting, pointing to a small photo in the corner. It showed Jack and another mechanic helping clear debris from Mrs. Henderson's driveway. Local hero and all that. Jack grunted, pulling on his work gloves. Any word on that Mercedes? Found it 2 miles out, wrapped around a tree. Pete shook his head. Insurance company's been calling. Seems it belonged to Pierce Industries. You know, that big Chicago firm that's been buying up real estate around here. Jack's hands stilled. Catherine's father's company, he realized. The board meeting she'd been so desperate to reach. The driver, he started to ask, but Pete was already nodding. Made it to Chicago somehow. Insurance adjuster said she caught a private helicopter from the regional airport that evening. Must be nice, having those kinds of resources. Jack thought of the broken pearls in his drawer, of mud-streaked designer clothes and trembling hands. Resources hadn't meant much when the tornado was bearing down on them. The morning passed in a blur of insurance forms and damaged vehicles. During his lunch break, Jack found himself reading the article again, wondering if Catherine was sitting in some Chicago high-rise right now, remembering the feel of Oklahoma mud and the sound of his voice telling her everything would be okay. The last paragraph caught his eye. In times of natural disaster, Pine Grove shows its true character. Distinctions of wealth and status disappear when the sirens wail. In a tornado's wake, we're all just neighbors, helping each other find our way home. Jack carefully folded the paper and tucked it into his back pocket. Somewhere in Chicago, a woman was wearing a necklace with missing pearls, carrying a piece of Pine Grove with her. And somehow he knew this story wasn't over yet. Jack wasn't sure what drew him to Pine Grove's tiny municipal airport that afternoon. Maybe it was the sight of Emma's latest drawing on the fridge, a swirling tornado with a stick figure hero beneath it. Or maybe it was the scrap of paper he'd been carrying in his wallet, where he'd scribbled down the tail number of an unfamiliar private jet that had requested emergency landing clearance. PI 2024K. He'd overheard the radio chatter during his maintenance shift at the airport's small service building. Private jets weren't completely unheard of in Pine Grove, but something about this one nagged at him. Pierce Industries. PI. The connection seemed too obvious to ignore. The jet appeared as a silver gleam against the Oklahoma sky, more graceful than the crop dusters and small commercial planes that usually occupied their airspace. Jack watched from the maintenance bay as it touched down with practiced ease, its engines humming to a gentle stop. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the door opened, and a familiar figure appeared at the top of the stairs. Catherine Pierce wore a simple blue dress now, her hair loose around her shoulders, a stark contrast to the mud-streaked businesswoman he'd pulled from the Mercedes. She paused, scanning the small airport until her eyes found him. "I wasn't sure you'd be here," she called down, a smile playing at her lips. "But somehow I knew you would be." Jack stepped forward, squinting against the sun. "Figured anyone willing to land a multi-million-dollar jet at our little airport must have a pretty good reason." Catherine descended the stairs, her movements more relaxed than he remembered. When she reached the bottom, she pulled something from her purse, a small velvet bag. "I found most of them," she said, opening the bag to reveal the recovered pearls. "But not all. I thought maybe we could look for the rest together." Before Jack could respond, a truck pulled up to the fence line, and Emma's face appeared, pressed against the passenger window. His mother-in-law Sarah waved from the driver's seat, clearly curious about the unexpected arrival. "Daddy," Emma called out, scrambling from the truck. "Is that a real private jet?" Catherine turned toward Emma's voice, and something soft crossed her face. She knelt down as Emma approached, putting them at eye level. "It is," Catherine said. "Would you like to see inside?" Emma's eyes widened, but she looked to Jack first. He nodded, and she broke into a gap-toothed grin. "Are you the lady from the tornado?" Emma asked, studying Catherine's face. "Daddy didn't say much, but Grandma said someone important was in that fancy car." Catherine glanced up at Jack, something unspoken passing between them. "I don't know about important," she said to Emma, "but your daddy saved my life that day. "He's good at saving people," Emma declared proudly. "He saved my goldfish when the power went out, and he saves old cars at his job, and he saved all my mum's pictures from our old house." Jack watched as Catherine absorbed this information, saw the way she really looked at Emma, not as a child to be humoured, but as someone whose words mattered. "I bet he did," Catherine said softly. Speaking of pictures, she reached into her purse again and pulled out a slightly bent photograph. "The emergency crews found this near where my car ended up. I think it belongs to you." Jack recognized it immediately, one of the water-damaged photos from his box, carried away by the tornado. It showed Sarah teaching Emma to walk, her tiny hands reaching for the camera, for him. "We thought we lost that one," he said, his voice rough. Catherine stood, brushing invisible dust from her dress. "Sometimes things that seem lost just take an unexpected path back home." She gestured to the jet. "Like me." Emma tugged at Catherine's dress. "Can we really see inside the plane? I've never been on one before." "Of course." Catherine smiled, then looked at Jack. "That is, if your daddy doesn't mind?" Jack studied them both, his daughter vibrating with excitement, and this woman who had flown back into their lives in the most dramatic way possible. The jet's tail number caught his eye again. PI 2024K. Pierce Industries, yes, but also something else. A new chapter, maybe. "Lead the way," he said, and Catherine's answering smile felt like sunshine after a storm. The inside of the private jet felt like stepping into another world. Emma moved from window to window, her eyes wide with wonder, while Jack noticed Catherine watching them both, her expression a mix of amusement and something deeper. "This is where I do my work," Catherine explained, gesturing to a small conference table. Papers were spread across it, architectural drawings, development plans, spreadsheets with numbers that made Jack's head spin. "Is this all for Pine Grove?" he asked, recognizing street names on one of the maps. Catherine nodded, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. "My father's company has been buying property here. He wants to modernize the town." She said the word carefully, like it might shatter. "But after the tornado, after what I saw here, I'm not sure that's what Pine Grove needs." Emma had settled at the table with the crayons and paper Catherine had thoughtfully provided. Her small hands moved purposefully across the page as the adults talked. "What does Pine Grove need?" Jack asked, genuinely curious. Catherine's eyes met his. "Community. The kind that shows up with chainsaws after a storm. The kind that pulls strangers from cars without asking who they are or what they're worth." She smiled softly. "The kind that saves people." "I'm almost done," Emma announced, holding up her drawing. She'd created a scene that made both adults pause. The private jet parked next to their modest house, with stick figures of all three of them standing between the two worlds. Hearts and tornadoes swirled in the background. "That's beautiful, Emma," Catherine said, taking the picture with careful hands. "Would you mind if I kept this? I could hang it in my office in Chicago." Emma beamed. "Really? Next to all your important papers?" "Absolutely. It might be the most important thing in there." Jack watched this exchange, feeling something shift in his chest. The Catherine who'd fled to Chicago in a helicopter seemed miles away from this woman who treated his daughter's artwork like a precious gift. "The board meeting," he said suddenly. "Did you make it?" Catherine's laugh surprised him, genuine, uninhibited. "I walked in late, covered in Oklahoma mud, missing my mother's pearls, and told my father's entire board that I'd just survived a tornado because a small-town mechanic had more sense than I did." She shook her head. "I think it was the first time I'd ever really surprised them." "What did they say?" "They wanted to send a disaster response team, corporate aid, publicity opportunities." She gestured to the plans on the table. "But I told them we needed to understand the town first, really understand it." Emma had moved to one of the jet's plush seats, her eyes growing heavy with afternoon sleepiness. Jack checked his watch. He had a repair job in an hour. "I should get her home," he said reluctantly. "Of course." Catherine gathered Emma's drawing and carefully slipped it into a leather portfolio. But maybe we could talk more. About the town, about the development plans. She hesitated. About everything. Jack thought about the broken pearls, about mud and fear and trust, about how sometimes the biggest storms brought the most unexpected gifts. "I know a place," he said. "Local diner. Best pie in Oklahoma, according to Emma's very thorough research." "Pie sounds perfect." Catherine's smile reached her eyes. "Though I should warn you, Chicago has some pretty serious pie contenders. Guess you'll have to judge for yourself." As they descended the jet stairs, Emma drowsy in Jack's arms, the afternoon sun caught the tail number again. PI 2024K. But now it seemed less like a corporate code and more like a promise. Of two worlds finding common ground, of new beginnings taking flight. Tomorrow? Catherine called as they reached Jack's truck for pie and town planning. "Tomorrow," Jack agreed, settling Emma in her seat. She was already asleep, clutching her crayons, a small smile on her face, as if she knew something the adults were just figuring out. As they drove away, Jack caught a glimpse of Catherine in his rearview mirror. She stood framed against her jet, holding Emma's drawing, looking not at the paper, but at their departing truck, like she was watching a future unfold that she hadn't known she wanted until a tornado showed her the way home. The glossy business magazine sat like an accusation on Jack's kitchen counter. Pierce Industries, the family dynasty reshaping American real estate, blazed across the cover, alongside a photo of Catherine and an older man with steel-grey hair and familiar eyes. The article had been waiting in his mailbox, anonymously sent, he suspected, by someone in town wanting him to know what he was getting into. "The coffee's ready," Catherine called from his kitchen. She'd arrived for their date wearing jeans and a simple blouse, looking more Pine Grove than Michigan Avenue. But the magazine told a different story. Catherine Pierce, heiress to a billion-dollar empire, notorious for transforming small towns into modern developments. "Thanks," Jack said, trying to slide the magazine out of sight, but Catherine had already spotted it. "Ah," she said softly. "I was wondering when that would surface." She picked up the magazine, her fingers tracing the edge of her father's stern face. Not exactly a flattering piece. "I haven't read it," Jack admitted, "but others have." Catherine's smile turned wry. "Is that why Mrs. Henderson crossed the street when she saw me yesterday? I thought maybe my city shoes offended her." Jack poured them both coffee, buying time. "People here, they're protective of the town. Change isn't always welcome. And neither are Pierce Industries' heirs." Catherine set the magazine down. "The article doesn't tell the whole story, Jack." "I'm listening." Catherine wrapped her hands around the coffee mug, as if drawing strength from its warmth. "My father built his empire by seeing potential where others saw decay. But somewhere along the way, he stopped seeing the people. Just numbers on spreadsheets, properties to be optimized." She took a breath. "That board meeting I was rushing to. I was supposed to present plans for Pine Grove's revitalization, high-end boutiques, luxury condos, a complete transformation of Main Street. And now? Now I can't stop thinking about your auto shop, about Pete's weathered face when he talks about fixing cars for 3 generations of the same family, about Emma's favorite diner where everyone knows her name." She met his eyes. "About a man who runs toward danger to save a stranger, not because it's profitable, but because it's right." The morning sun streamed through Jack's kitchen window, catching the silver threads in Catherine's dark hair. From the living room came the sound of Emma humming as she worked on her homework. "The magazine calls you the Ice Princess of Real Estate," Jack said, unable to reconcile that image with the woman who'd sat on his worn couch yesterday, teaching Emma to make paper airplanes. Catherine laughed, but it held an edge. "Daddy's perfect successor, cool, calculating, ready to continue the Pierce legacy." She pushed the magazine away. "The tornado changed everything, Jack. Being in that ditch, feeling so small against nature's power, It made me question what legacy really means. And what did you decide? I'm still deciding. She reached across the counter, her fingers brushing his. But I know it has something to do with the way this town feels like home after 3 days. More than Chicago has in 3 years. The moment stretched between them, full of unspoken possibilities and complications. Then Emma burst into the kitchen, backpack in hand. "Daddy, Catherine, can we go to the diner now? You promised pie." Reality crashed back in. Jack saw Catherine withdraw her hand, saw her glance at the magazine with its dynasty headlines and billion-dollar expectations. "Pie sounds perfect," Catherine said, but something had shifted. The weight of who she was supposed to be, hung in the air between them. As they headed for the door, Jack caught a final glimpse of the magazine cover. Catherine's professional smile looked nothing like the real one she'd given him over coffee. Nothing like the way she now laughed at Emma's excited chatter about apple versus cherry pie. He wondered which version of Catherine would ultimately win out. The ice princess, or the woman who'd found something unexpected in a tornado's wake. The magazine remained on his counter, a glossy reminder that some storms were harder to weather than others. The recipe card was yellowed with age, its corners soft from years of handling. Sarah's handwriting flowed across it in faded blue ink. Miller Family Comfort Casserole. Catherine stood in Jack's kitchen, trying to decipher the graceful cursive, while Emma perched on a stool, supervising. "Mama always added extra cheese," Emma explained, pointing to a note in the margin. "And Daddy says she never measured anything exactly right, but it always turned out perfect." Catherine nodded, acutely, aware of the trust being placed in her hands. This wasn't just a recipe. It was a piece of their history, a connection to the woman whose absence still shaped their lives. "Are you sure your dad won't mind us surprising him?" she asked, measuring ingredients with more care than she'd ever given to million-dollar contracts. Emma shook her head, her ponytail swinging. "He's been smiling more since you came back. Real smiles, not the kind he uses when he's pretending everything's okay." The observation, delivered with a child's innocent directness, made Catherine's hands still over the casserole dish. She thought about the past 2 weeks, morning coffee at the diner, long talks about the town's future, Emma's drawings now decorating her temporary office at the local realtor's. "Daddy says we should add the bacon now," Emma announced, reading her mother's notes. "He always tells the story about how Mama burned the first batch she ever made because she was nervous about cooking for Grandma." Catherine smiled, imagining a younger Sarah in this same kitchen trying to impress her mother-in-law. Were they close? Your mom and Grandma? Daddy says they both love taking care of people. Emma handed Catherine the bacon with the serious concentration of a sous chef. "Like you do." "Me?" Catherine sprinkled the bacon over the casserole, surprised by the comparison. "Uh-huh. You helped Mr. Peterson fix his store sign yesterday, and you brought Mrs. Henderson those flowers, even though she was mean about your fancy shoes, and you make Daddy laugh like Mama did in the videos." Catherine slid the casserole into the oven, using the moment to compose herself. When she turned back, Emma was holding out a clean recipe card. "Maybe you could write down one of your recipes too," she suggested, "to keep with Mama's." The simple request carried the weight of acceptance. A family of belonging. Catherine took the card with trembling fingers, thinking of her own mother's recipes, lost to cancer and corporate ambition when Catherine was barely older than Emma. "I'd like that," she said softly. "Though I should warn you, I'm much better at spreadsheets than cooking." Emma giggled. "That's okay. Daddy says love is the secret ingredient anyway." The timer ticked quietly, marking minutes that felt increasingly precious. Catherine began to clean up, falling into an easy rhythm with Emma, the little girl washing dishes while she dried, just as she must do with Jack. The sound of his truck in the driveway made them both look up. Emma rushed to the window, then turned to Catherine with wide eyes. "Quick, the table isn't set." They scrambled to arrange plates and silverware, Catherine following Emma's precise instructions about which glasses to use and where the napkins should go. The front door opened just as they finished. "Something smells like—" Jack's voice trailed off as he entered the kitchen. He took in the scene. The familiar casserole dish in the oven, his daughter's proud grin, Catherine still holding Sarah's. "Recipe card?" "Emma helped me," Catherine said quickly. "She knew all the special instructions." Jack crossed to the oven, peering through the glass. For a moment, Catherine feared she'd overstepped, invaded a sacred memory she had no right to touch. Then he straightened and smiled, one of those real smiles Emma had mentioned. "Sarah would have loved this," he said quietly. "She always believed recipes were meant to be shared." He moved to the cabinet, pulling out an extra set of pot holders. "Though I should warn you, Emma's very particular about how the casserole is cut. Apparently, triangles taste better than squares." "Daddy!" Emma protested, but she was beaming. Catherine watched them, father and daughter moving in practiced harmony as they finished setting the table. The recipe card in her hand felt warm, like it had absorbed generations of family meals and laughter, like it was inviting her to add her own chapter to their story. "I think it's ready," she said, and they all knew she meant more than just the casserole. The merger documents arrived by courier just as Catherine was leaving the diner with Jack and Emma. Thick manila envelopes stamped with "confidential" in bold red letters. They might as well have been bombs for how they made her stomach drop. "Everything okay?" Jack asked, noticing her expression as she signed for the package. "Just work stuff," she said, but her hands tightened on the envelope. Inside were papers that would change everything, not just for her, but for all of Pine Grove. "Can we still go to the park?" Emma asked, chocolate pie crumbs still clinging to her chin. Catherine forced a smile. "Of course. I just need to make one quick call." She stepped outside, while Jack helped Emma clean up. The Oklahoma sun beat down on her shoulders as she dialed her father's number. "I assume you've received the documents," Richard Pierce said by way of greeting. "The merger paperwork?" "Yes, just now." Catherine watched through the diner window as Jack tenderly wiped Emma's face with a napkin. "But Daddy, we haven't finished the community impact studies I suggested. Pine Grove isn't ready for—" "Pine Grove doesn't need to be ready," her father cut in. "The merger with Global Tech Development is happening, Catherine. Their plans for the town are exactly what we need to maximize our investment. Their plans will destroy everything that makes this place special." "Special?" Richard's laugh was sharp. "A tornado-prone backwater with one main street and a diner that still serves pie for $2. Catherine, you're not thinking like a Pierce." She watched Jack and Emma emerge from the diner, saw how they both instinctively looked for her. "Maybe I'm thinking like someone who finally understands what matters. What matters is securing our legacy. The board meets next week to finalize the merger. I need you back in Chicago to present the Pine Grove acquisition strategy." "Daddy, this isn't a request, Catherine. It's time to remember who you are." The line went dead. Catherine stared at her phone, then at the envelope containing Global Tech's vision for Pine Grove, luxury condos where the diner stood, a high-end shopping complex replacing Pete's Auto Shop, artistic installations celebrating the town's rustic charm while systematically erasing it. "Bad news?" Jack asked softly. He'd walked over while she was on the phone, leaving Emma to chase butterflies near the diner's flower boxes. Catherine looked up at him. This man who'd saved her life, and might have saved her soul too if she'd let him. "My father wants me back in Chicago. There's a merger." Understanding dawned in his eyes. He'd seen enough business deals working at the airport to know what corporate mergers meant for small towns. "When do you leave?" "Jack, Catherine," Emma called out, "look what I found." She ran over, cupping something gently in her hands. "Show me, sweetheart," Catherine said, grateful for the interruption. Emma opened her hands to reveal a monarch butterfly, its orange wings slowly opening and closing. "It was stuck in a spider web, but I saved it. Like Daddy saved you." The simple parallel, delivered with a child's perfect timing, made Catherine's throat tight. She looked at the merger documents again, thinking of her father's plans, of Emma's favorite diner replaced by cold steel and glass. Sometimes, saving things means making hard choices, she said, watching the butterfly take flight. Catherine, Jack's voice was gentle, whatever's in that envelope, we'll figure it out. She wanted to believe him, wanted to believe there was a way to bridge her two worlds, to be both Catherine Pierce, corporate heiress, and just Catherine, who helped Emma with her homework and learned to make Sarah's recipes, and was falling in love with more than just a town. The park can wait, Jack said, reading her expression. Why don't you take those papers to your office? Read them through. Emma and I can... No. Catherine straightened her shoulders. The park can't wait. These papers... She tucked them into her bag. They've waited this long. They can wait a few more hours. Emma cheered, grabbing both their hands to lead them toward the park. Catherine let herself be pulled along, trying not to think about the ticking clock, about board meetings and merger deadlines, and her father's disappointment. But later that night, alone in her hotel room, she spread the documents across her bed. Page after page of corporate strategy, of profit projections, of plans to revitalize Pine Grove into something unrecognizable. Her phone buzzed with a text from Jack. Emma wants you to know she saved you a swing at the park tomorrow, if you're free. Catherine looked at the corporate letterhead, then at the simple text message. Two worlds, pulling her in opposite directions. Soon she'd have to choose. The legacy she was born to, or the life she never knew she wanted. She picked up her phone to reply, but her eyes caught on the merger's proposed timeline. Phase 1. Acquisition of Main Street properties. Pete's auto shop was listed first. 2 first-class plane tickets lay on Catherine's hotel desk, Chicago-bound for the following weekend. She'd spent hours arranging everything, a suite at the Four Seasons, reservations at child-friendly yet elegant restaurants, a private tour of the shed aquarium that would make Emma's eyes light up. Every detail planned to show Jack that their worlds could coexist, if only she could convince herself. A knock at her door interrupted her thoughts. Jack stood there, still in his work clothes, grease staining his collar. Pete said you stopped. By the shop today? Catherine nodded, letting him in. I wanted to talk to you about something. She gestured to the tickets. I have to go back to Chicago next week for the board meeting, and I thought, maybe you and Emma could come with me. Jack picked up one of the tickets, his calloused fingers a stark contrast against the premium cardstock. First class? I want you both to be comfortable. That's not what I meant. He set the ticket down carefully. Catherine, people like us don't fly first class. People like us. She felt a familiar tension headache building. Jack, I'm trying to... Show me your world, I know. He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. But have you thought about what happens after? When we come back to Pine Grove and Emma's telling all her friends about private aquarium tours and luxury hotels. Would that be so terrible, letting her experience something different? Different isn't the problem. Jack ran a hand through his hair, leaving it slightly disheveled. But right now, Emma's happy with our life, with pie at the diner and swimming. At the community pool, what happens when she realizes there's a whole other world she can't have? Catherine moved to the window, looking out at Pine Grove's main street. The merger documents were still in her briefcase, heavy with the weight of what they meant for this town. For them, unless, Jack said quietly, she can have it. Is that what this is about? Showing us what life could be like if I figure out a way to make it work. Catherine turned back to him. Jack, I have to present the merger plans next week, but if I can show my father, the board, what Pine Grove really is, show them the people behind the profit projections. You think bringing the local mechanic and his daughter to Chicago will change their minds about turning Main Street into luxury boutiques? The hurt in his voice made her wince. That's not fair. You're not just the local mechanic. His smile turned wry. But I am, Catherine, and I'm proud of that. Emma's proud of it. Catherine crossed to him, taking his hand. The contrast between their skin, his weathered and work rough, hers manicured and smooth, seemed suddenly significant. "Come to Chicago," she said softly. "Not to prove anything to my father or the board. Come because I want the two people I care about most to be there when I try to save this town." Jack's expression softened. He touched her cheek with his free hand, and Catherine leaned into it, grease stains and all. "Emma will need a dress," he said finally, "for fancy restaurants." Catherine's heart leapt. "I can help with that." "No." Jack's voice was firm but gentle. "We'll get one here at Marion's boutique, something she can wear to church after, not just for playing princess in Chicago." Catherine nodded, understanding the line he was drawing. "Jack, I need you to know, whatever happens with the merger, with my father's plans, what I feel for you and Emma, that's real. I know." He pulled her closer, and she breathed in the familiar scent of motor oil and pine grove dust. "But sometimes real isn't enough." Emma's excited voice played in Catherine's mind, imagining her reaction to the plane tickets, to Chicago's skyline, to all the wonders Catherine wanted to share. But Jack's words echoed too. "People like us don't fly first class." The tickets sat on her desk, promising adventure, threatening change. Catherine held on to Jack, wondering if it was possible to stand at a crossroads and choose both paths. Outside her window, the sun set over Main Street, painting Pierre's diner and Pete's auto shop in shades of gold. Soon, those buildings might exist only in memory, replaced by whatever Global Tech's architects deemed appropriate for the market, unless she found a way to prove that some things were worth more than market value. "What time's the flight?" Jack asked against her hair. "Friday morning, I thought we could have breakfast at the diner first." His chest rumbled with quiet laughter. "One last $2 pie before the Four Seasons." "No," Catherine said firmly. "The first of many $2 pies, I promise." The suit hung in Jack's hotel room like an expensive ghost. Tom Ford, the label read, hand-delivered by Catherine's personal shopper, after he'd mentioned not owning anything appropriate for dinner at the Chicago club. The price tag had been discreetly removed, but Jack had caught a glimpse, more than he made in 2 weeks at the auto shop. "Daddy, you look like a movie star." Emma twirled around him in her new dress from Marion's, a simple blue thing that somehow looked perfect in both worlds. She adapted so easily. His little girl, moving from Pine Grove diners to Chicago penthouses with the same gap-toothed smile. "The tie's crooked," he muttered, fighting with the silk in the mirror. A soft knock preceded Catherine's entrance. She wore a black cocktail dress that probably cost more than his truck, but her eyes were warm and familiar as she moved to help him with the tie. "You clean up nice, Miller," she teased, smoothing his lapels. "I feel like I'm wearing someone else's skin." Catherine's hands stilled. "We don't have to go. We could order room service, watch movies with Emma." "No." Jack caught her hands. "This is your world. I want to understand it." The Chicago club proved to be exactly as intimidating as he'd imagined. Crystal chandeliers, leather chairs that had probably witnessed a century of power deals, and everywhere the subtle markers of old money, the kind of wealth that didn't need to announce itself. "Catherine, darling," a silver-haired woman approached, their table, diamonds glinting at her throat. "When Richard said you'd finally returned to civilization, I was thrilled." Though he didn't mention, her eyes slid to Jack and Emma with practiced disdain. "Jack Miller," he said, standing and extending his hand. The woman took it as if it might bite. "Jack saved my life during the tornado," Catherine said firmly. "And Emma here has been teaching me the fine art of puzzle solving." How quaint. The woman's smile never reached her eyes. "Richard mentioned you've been researching the Pine Grove development. Quite a project. Though between us, I'd have sent a team rather than going myself. Those small towns can be so provincial." Jack felt Catherine tense beside him. Under the table, Emma's small hand found his. "Actually," Catherine said, her voice carrying just enough to turn heads at nearby tables, "Pine Grove has taught me more about real development than a dozen market analyses. Did you know their community center was built entirely by volunteers? Or that after the tornado, they had a functional recovery plan in place within hours? The woman blinked, wrong-footed. Well, I'm sure it's all very efficient. But darling, you're a Pierce. Surely you're not going native. Going human, Margaret. You should try it sometime. After Margaret retreated, Jack squeezed Catherine's hand. You didn't have to defend us. Yes, I did. She looked around the dining room at the people she'd known all her life. I used to think this was normal. That success meant designer suits and $100 cocktails and talking about people instead of to them. And now I know what success really looks like. It looks like Pete staying late to fix Mrs. Henderson's car because she needs it for work tomorrow. Like your daughter making welcome cards for tornado relief volunteers. Emma, who had been quietly mastering the art of multiple forks, looked up. Can we show them your office tomorrow, Catherine? I brought my drawing of the jet to hang up. Catherine's eyes met Jack's over their daughter's head. Your daughter, he'd thought, but Emma had said your office like it belonged to all of them. Of course, sweetheart. Though Catherine's phone buzzed with a message. Tomorrow might be complicated. Daddy's called an emergency board meeting. The merger? Jack asked quietly. Catherine nodded. Global Tech's CEO flew in early. They want to accelerate the timeline. The suit suddenly felt tighter, its perfect tailoring a subtle stranglehold. Jack thought of Pete's auto shop, of the diner, of all the places that made Pine Grove home. Maybe, he said carefully, Emma and I should head back early. Let you focus on the business side of things. No, Catherine's response was immediate. I need you both here. When I face that board tomorrow, I need to remember exactly what I'm fighting for. Emma, oblivious to the undertones, happily speared a piece of unfamiliar fish with her salad fork. The matron winced. Catherine stifled a laugh. Besides, she added softly, you're the only ones in this whole city who see me, instead of the Pierce name. Jack adjusted his borrowed tie, thinking of all the ways love could bridge worlds and all the ways it couldn't. The suit might not be his skin, but the woman beside him, teaching his daughter which fork to use while plotting to save their town, she felt more real than any designer label. The small velvet box tumbled from Catherine's purse as she rushed to gather materials for the board meeting. It hit the hotel room carpet with a soft thud, but the sound might as well have been a thunderclap for how it stopped Jack in his tracks. I can explain, Catherine said quickly, but her words faltered as Jack picked up the box. Inside, a diamond ring caught the morning light. Elegant but not ostentatious, exactly the kind of ring a wealthy woman might choose if she were trying to accommodate a simpler lifestyle. Were you going to tell me? Jack's voice was carefully neutral. Or was this part of your presentation to the board? Look, I'm marrying a local. Now trust me about Pine Grove. Jack, no, it's not. Daddy. Emma stood in the doorway between their adjoining rooms, still in her pajamas. Why are you mad? I'm not mad, Princess. But his hands were shaking as he set the ring box on the desk. Why don't you get dressed? We need to pack. Catherine stepped forward. Pack? The board meeting isn't until we're going home. Jack turned to her, and the hurt in his eyes made her stomach clench. You've got your merger to handle, and we don't belong here. Please, let me explain. The ring, my father gave it to me yesterday. It's not what you think. What I think, Jack said quietly, is that I'm a fool. You swept into town in your private jet, and I actually believed. He shook his head. People like us don't fly first class, remember? Emma looked between them, her lower lip trembling. But Catherine's coming back with us, right? For Puzzle Saturday. The simple question cracked something in Catherine's carefully maintained composure. Emma, sweetheart, the ring was my mother's. She rushed on, words tumbling out. Daddy brought it to me with an ultimatum. Marry Charles Winston of Global Tech, cement the merger, secure the Pierce legacy. He thinks if he can tie me to Global Tech personally, I'll stop fighting their plans for Pine Grove. Jack stilled. Charles Winston? The CEO who flew in early? Catherine nodded miserably. Daddy's been playing matchmaker for months, long before. The tornado. The merger was always about more than business. And what did you tell your father? I told him I'd give him my answer at the board meeting. Catherine moved closer, willing Jack to understand. I was going to return the ring publicly, show them all that Pine Grove isn't just another acquisition to be managed, that some things matter more than mergers and marriages of convenience. Emma had crept closer during this exchange, her small face serious. Is that why you were crying in your room last night? Catherine's breath caught. She hadn't known anyone had heard her. Oh, sweetheart. She knelt down to Emma's level. I was crying because sometimes grown-ups make things complicated when they should be simple. Like how your daddy taught you that fixing cars isn't just about engines. It's about helping people get where they need to go. And where do you need to go? Jack asked softly. Catherine stood, facing him. Home, to Pine Grove, to puzzle. Saturdays and $2 pie, and a mechanic who runs into tornadoes to save strangers. She took a shaky breath. But first I have to face that boardroom and fight for our town, and I'm terrified I'll fail. Jack was quiet for a long moment, looking at the ring box that had nearly shattered everything. Finally he picked it up and held it out to her. Then let's make sure you don't fail. His voice was rough. Show them what Pine Grove is worth. Show them what you're worth. Emma tugged at Catherine's hand. Can I come watch? I could bring my drawing of the jet. Despite everything, Catherine laughed. Oh, honey, I wish you could. But I think, she looked at Jack, I think this is something I need to do alone. To prove to myself, as much as them, that I'm not just Richard Pierce's daughter anymore. Jack nodded, understanding. Then he reached out and straightened her blazer lapel, much as she had done with his borrowed suit. For what it's worth, he said quietly, you never were just Richard Pierce's daughter. Not to us. The ring box felt heavy in Catherine's hand. The weight of expectations, of legacy, of choices. But as she tucked it into her briefcase for the confrontation ahead, she felt lighter than she had in years. Sometimes, she realized, you had to risk losing everything to find out what you couldn't bear to lose. Dear Catherine. The letter sat unfinished on Jack's kitchen counter, coffee rings staining its edges. 3 days since they'd left Chicago. 3 days of Emma asking when Catherine would come home. 3 days of watching his daughter check her, drawing supplies, making sure she had enough paper for when Catherine needs more pictures for her office. I don't know how to explain to Emma why we left. How do I tell her that sometimes loving someone means... He crumpled another attempt, adding it to the growing pile. Through the window, he could see Pine Grove's Main Street, unchanged yet somehow different. Every storefront now held 2 images, what it was and what it might become. His phone buzzed. Pete calling from the shop. You need to see this, Pete said without preamble. Channel 7 News. Jack flipped on the small TV they kept in the kitchen for weather reports. Catherine's face filled the screen, standing at a podium in Chicago. The caption read, Pierce Industries heiress challenges global tech merger. Cannot and will not support any development plan that destroys the heart of communities like Pine Grove, Catherine was saying, her voice steady despite the camera flashes. These towns aren't just lines on a profit chart. They're living, breathing places where real people build real lives. The camera cut to Richard Pierce's thunderous expression, then to Charles Winston's calculated smile. Is this about the merger? A reporter called out. Or about the rumored personal alliance between Pierce Industries and Global Tech? Catherine's eyes found the camera, and Jack felt her gaze across the hundreds of miles between them. This is about choosing what truly matters, about recognizing that some things can't be bought, sold, or developed into luxury condos. She reached into her jacket and pulled out a familiar velvet box. My father offered me this ring as part of a package deal. Marry the right man, secure the right merger, be the right kind of Pierce. She opened the box, her mother's ring glinting under the press lights. I'm returning it, along with my position at Pierce Industries. The press room erupted. Jack sank into a kitchen chair, the unfinished letter forgotten. Dad? Emma stood in the doorway, clutching her latest drawing. Catherine's on TV. Yeah, princess, she is. She looks sad. Emma climbed into his lap, studying the screen. Like you do when you miss Mama. Jack hugged her close, watching, as Catherine fielded questions with grace, but couldn't quite hide the cost behind her eyes. He thought of all his crumpled attempts to explain, to apologize, to bridge the gap their fears had created. His phone buzzed again, a text from Mrs. Henderson. "That girl's got spine. Don't mess this up, Jack Miller." Emma pointed to the screen where Catherine was still speaking. "She's talking about our town, about Pierre's pie, and Mr. Peterson's bookstore, and Pete's auto shop." Jack finished softly, as Catherine mentioned it by name, describing how real value couldn't be measured in property assessments. The press conference ended, with Catherine declining further questions. The local news anchors began analyzing what this meant for Pine Grove's future, but Jack wasn't listening. He was reading the determination in Catherine's stance, the way she'd squared her shoulders against her father's empire. Emma slid from his lap and retrieved his latest unfinished letter. "Maybe instead of writing, you should just call her, Daddy. Like when I'm scared at night and need to hear your voice." Jack stared at the blank paper that had defeated him for 3 days. All his careful explanations felt hollow now, watching Catherine risk everything to protect their town, their home. His phone buzzed one more time. A text from Catherine. "I meant what I said, all of it." Emma peeked at the message. "Are you going to answer her?" Jack looked at his daughter's hopeful face, at the pile of crumpled explanations, at the TV still showing clips of Catherine's stand against her father's plans. "No, Princess," he said, standing up. "We're going to do better than that." He pulled out his wallet, checking the emergency fund he kept there. "How do you feel about a little road trip?" Emma's eyes lit up. "To Chicago. To Chicago." Jack grabbed his keys. "But first we need to make a stop at Marion's boutique. I think I need a new tie, one that's actually mine." The unfinished letter remained on the counter, its attempted explanations unnecessary now. Sometimes actions spoke louder than words, and sometimes the road home took an unexpected detour through Chicago. The old photograph was buried in a box of Pine Grove Historical Society records that Catherine had been searching through since her return from Chicago. She almost missed it, just another black-and-white tornado photo in a town that had seen its share of storms. But something about the man in the image made her pause. He stood in front of a demolished gas station, arm around a shell-shocked stranger in a business suit. The caption read, "Local mechanic David Miller assists stranded. Traveler Richard Pierce, 1982. Catherine's hands trembled as she studied the image. Her father, young and vulnerable, being helped by Jack's father. The same gas station that would later become Pete's auto shop. "Find something interesting?" The voice made her jump. Mrs. Henderson stood in the Historical Society's doorway, looking less formidable than she had when criticizing Catherine's shoes weeks ago. "Did you know about this?" Catherine held up the photo. Mrs. Henderson adjusted her glasses, then smiled. "Lord, I'd almost forgotten. That storm was something else. Your daddy's car got picked up and tossed right into Old Man Wilson's cornfield. David Miller pulled him out, got him patched up, even loaned him clothes while his suit dried. My father never mentioned—" "No, he wouldn't have." Mrs. Henderson sat down beside her. "He was different then. Scared young man with big dreams, not sure if he'd survive to realize them. David showed him real Oklahoma hospitality, wouldn't take a dime for his help." Catherine traced her father's face in the photo. "What changed him?" "Success, probably. Makes some folks forget where they came from." Mrs. Henderson patted Catherine's hand. "Makes others remember what matters." Catherine's phone buzzed, another message from her father's lawyers about her resignation. She ignored it, still staring at the photo. The way David Miller stood, solid and sure beside a stranger in need, reminded her so much of Jack. "Your announcement's been playing on repeat," Mrs. Henderson said. "Standing up to your daddy like that. Well, let's just say you won't have to worry about your shoes anymore. You're Pine Grove folk now." "I haven't won yet," Catherine reminded her. "Global tech could still what? Turn us into some fancy strip mall," Mrs. Henderson snorted. "Honey, Towns like Pine Grove don't survive by accident. We survive because people fight for us, just like David Miller fought for a stranger in a storm, and his son fought for you. Catherine carefully removed the photo from its plastic sleeve. Could I borrow this? There's someone who needs to see it. Planning to show your daddy? No, Catherine smiled. Someone more important. The drive to Pete's auto shop took less than 5 minutes, but Catherine's mind raced the whole way. How many times had her father driven through Pine Grove over the years, passing the very spot where he'd once been saved? Had he recognized Jack's name when the tornado story hit the news? She found Jack under the hood of Mrs. Peterson's ancient Volvo, Emma sitting on a nearby stool with her homework. Catherine! Emma launched herself forward for a hug. Did you see our signs? We made them this morning. Catherine had seen them, hand-painted protests dotting Main Street, Save Pine Grove, Community Not Condos, and her favorite, clearly Emma's work. Some things are worth more than money. They're perfect, Catherine said, hugging Emma tight. Then to Jack, I need to show you something. He wiped his hands on a shop rag, expression guarded but hopeful. They hadn't really talked since his surprise appearance at her Chicago press. In conference 3 days ago, both unsure how to bridge the gap their fears had created. Catherine held out the photo. Jack took it, confusion turning to disbelief as he recognized his father. Is that my father? In 1982, after a tornado. Emma peered at the photo. Grandpa David. Daddy, he looks just like you. History has a way of repeating itself, Catherine said softly. Different storms, same story. Jack stared at the image of their fathers together, decades before their own lives would intertwine. Dad never told me. Neither did mine, but maybe, Catherine took a deep breath, maybe they didn't need to. Maybe some things are just meant to be, waiting for the right storm to bring them to light. Jack looked up, really looked at her for the first time since Chicago. You gave up everything, your job, your inheritance. No, Catherine moved closer, taking his grease-stained hand. I found everything. Right here in Pine Grove, where my father once learned the same lesson I did, that sometimes it takes losing your way to find where you belong. The photo sat between them, proof that their stories had been connected long before that first fateful tornado. Outside, Emma's protest sign fluttered in the Oklahoma breeze, its simple truth echoing across generations. Some things really were worth more than money. The Pine Grove Gazette's special edition magazine cover captured the moment perfectly. Catherine standing on Main Street's sidewalk, surrounded by townspeople, her father and Charles Winston facing her across a symbolic divide. The headline read, Love Saves Main Street, How a Tornado Changed Everything. Catherine hadn't planned the confrontation, but when her father's motorcade rolled into town, the community had gathered spontaneously. Now, a week later, she sat in Pierre's diner, sharing the magazine with Jack and Emma over breakfast. You look like a superhero, Emma said, pointing to the photo, like when you're telling the mean business guys they can't have our town. Catherine smiled, remembering that day. She'd been terrified, but you couldn't tell from the image. The photographer had caught her mid-speech, passion evident in her stance. Read it again, Daddy, Emma urged, syrup-sticky fingers reaching for the magazine. Jack cleared his throat, finding the passage they'd all memorized. In an unprecedented move, Catherine Pierce revealed her counter-proposal, using her personal inheritance to establish the Pine Grove Community Trust. The foundation will preserve historic buildings while supporting local business development, ensuring the town's character remains intact while allowing for sustainable growth. You forgot the best part, Emma protested. Catherine reached over, turning the page to Emma's favorite quote. When asked why she would sacrifice her fortune to save a small Oklahoma town, Ms. Pierce's answer was simple. Some things are worth more than money. Pine Grove taught me that love isn't just about grand gestures. It's about morning coffee at the diner, puzzle Saturdays with people who become family, and having the courage to protect what matters. The bell above the diner door chimed. Richard Pierce entered, looking both out of place and strangely at home in his expensive suit. He'd aged since the photo of him with David Miller, but something of that young, vulnerable man showed in his eyes as he approached their table. "Daddy," Catherine said softly, standing. "The board approved your proposal," he said without preamble. "Global Tech is withdrawing their merger offer." Emma bounced in her seat. "Does that mean we get to keep our town?" Richard looked at his granddaughter, a title he hadn't earned yet but desperately wanted to. "Yes, it does. And," he pulled out a familiar velvet box, "I believe this belongs to you, Catherine. Not as a condition or a demand, but as your mother's daughter. She would have been proud of your choice." Catherine accepted the ring, but instead of putting it on, she handed it to Emma. "Would you keep this safe for me, sweetheart, until I need it?" Emma's eyes widened as she recognized the responsibility being placed in her hands. "When will you need it?" "When the time is right," Jack answered, meeting Catherine's gaze with a promise of his own. Richard cleared his throat. "The trust paperwork needs your signature, and there's something else." He pulled out the old tornado photo. "I found this in my files. Thought maybe Pete's auto shop might want it for their wall, a reminder that some debts take generations to repay." Catherine watched her father leave, the magazine's cover photo catching her eye again. But now she saw beyond the dramatic confrontation to the details. Jack standing proud behind her, Emma clutching her protest sign, the entire town unified not just against change, but for something better. "We should frame it," Jack suggested, following her gaze. "Put it next to Dad's photo at the shop, next to the calendar," Emma added, "so everyone can see when Catherine's coming to Puzzle Saturday." Catherine felt tears prick her eyes. The magazine told a story of dramatic stands and business deals, but the real story was in the little things. Emma's drawings decorating her new office above the hardware store, Jack's growing collection of properly fitted ties, the way the entire town now saved their cars for Pete's auto shop, because that's Catherine's family. "Speaking of puzzles," she said, composing herself, "I found one you might like, Emma. It's a picture of the Chicago skyline, but—" She pulled out the box, showing the tornado worked into the design. "Sometimes the most beautiful things come from mixing two worlds together." Jack's hand found hers under the table as Emma examined the puzzle with expert eyes. Through the diner window, Pine Grove's Main Street glowed in the morning sun, unchanged yet transformed, just like them. The magazine cover had captured one moment of victory, but the real triumph was here, in sticky breakfast fingers and shared puzzles, in a father learning to bend and a daughter learning to stay, in a love that had taken root in tornado soil and grown strong enough to shelter an entire town. The house keys lay on Pierre's counter between their coffee cups, 3 sets gleaming in the morning light. One for each of them, Catherine had insisted, including Emma. Because home wasn't just about having a place, it was about belonging. "There, it's perfect," Emma declared, clutching her keyring with its butterfly charm. "It has a big yard like our old house, but also a fancy office like Catherine's Chicago place, and Daddy can still walk to work." The house was a Victorian landmark on Pine Grove's historic register, one of the first properties Catherine had protected through the community trust. Not too grand, not too humble. Like the town itself, it balanced between two worlds. "Ah, you sure about this?" Jack asked softly, watching Emma sketch their new home on her placemat. "Living above the hardware store has been fine." "Jack Miller," Catherine cut him off with a smile. "If you ask me one more time if I'm sure about choosing this life, I'm going to have Pete hide your toolbox." He laughed, the last of his uncertainty fading. "Pete's on my side. Shop family, remember?" "Oh, really?" Catherine raised an eyebrow. "Who do you think helped me move your tools to the new garage last night?" Their playful argument was interrupted by Mrs. Henderson approaching their table, armed with her ever-present camera. As the Gazette's self-appointed town historian, she'd been documenting Pine Grove's transformation. "First breakfast as official homeowners," she announced. "This One's going in the archives. They posed together, Emma holding up her key proudly. Catherine noticed Jack's hand slip into his pocket, probably touching the small velvet box he thought she didn't know about. The same box that had once held her mother's ring, now holding something chosen just for her. Almost forgot. Mrs. Henderson said, pulling out a file folder. Found another old photo you might want for the house. Your daddy's not the only one with a tornado story, Catherine. The photograph showed Catherine's mother, young and laughing, taking shelter at Pierre's during a storm in the 70s. She'd been on a cross-country trip, stopped for pie, and stayed 3 days while roads were cleared. In the background, a teenage Sarah, Jack's future wife, could be seen waiting tables. Our mamas knew each other, Emma whispered, touching the photo with gentle fingers. Before everything. Catherine blinked back tears, seeing the connections that had always been there waiting to be discovered. Think we should hang it in the new kitchen? Next to my calendar! Emma was already planning the wall space. And my tornado drawing. And the magazine cover and we'll need to leave room for new memories, Jack added, his hand finding Catherine's under the table. The diner's bell chimed as Pete entered, covered in grease despite the early hour. Thought I'd find you. All here. Got an emergency at the shop. Thompson family's car broke down on their way to Dallas. Was hoping my new business partner might help out. Catherine grabbed her keys. The shop set. Not the house set. After the trust was established, she'd surprised everyone by asking to apprentice at Pete's part-time, learning the family business from the ground up. Family business now, Pete had corrected her. Millers have been fixing Pine Grove's cars for 3 generations. 4, once Emma's. Old enough? I want to come too. Emma gathered her drawings. I can work on the new shop sign while you fix cars. The sign had been Emma's idea, updating Pete's auto shop to Miller and Pierce Family Motors. Pete had pretended to grumble about the change, but Catherine had caught him admiring Emma's design sketches more than once. Hold on, Jack said, standing. Can't let my 2 favorite mechanics leave without proper fuel. He signaled Pierre for their usual to-go order. Coffee for the adults, hot chocolate for Emma, and pie for sharing. Catherine watched him, this man who'd run into a tornado to save her and then taught her that the real courage was in building a life worth saving. The house keys caught the sunlight, throwing tiny rainbows across the table. Ready to go home? First, she asked, gathering her things. I need to change into work clothes. Home, Emma repeated happily, clutching her key. Our home. They stepped out into the Oklahoma morning, the air holding that particular sweetness it got after summer rain. Main Street stretched before them, preserved but not frozen, growing but not losing itself. Like them, the house waited just around. The corner, its wraparound porch already decorated with Emma's toys and Catherine's business papers and Jack's current puzzle project. The front door had 3 locks, 1 for each key, 1 for each heart finding its way home. Race you! Emma called, taking off down the sidewalk. Jack and Catherine followed more slowly, hands linked, keys jingling in their pockets like wind chimes, in an Oklahoma breeze. Behind them, Pete's auto shop sign caught the morning sun, the new name a promise of futures merging, of families growing, of love building something stronger than any storm could tear down. The new family portrait held pride of place in the Pine Grove Storm Safety Center's lobby. In it, Jack and Catherine stood with Emma between them, all 3 wearing matching Miller and Pierce Family Motors shirts. Behind them, the center's impressive weather radar system tracked Oklahoma's ever-changing skies. Can't believe it's been a year, Pete said, adjusting the frame's angle. The safety center had been Catherine's first major project through the community trust, a state-of-the-art facility that doubled as a community gathering space. Best year of my life, Catherine replied, watching through the lobby windows as Jack helped Emma set up for the center's first anniversary celebration. Her engagement ring, not her mother's, but one Jack had chosen himself, caught the sunlight as she waved to them. The portrait had been Emma's idea, of course. "We need a picture that shows both parts," she'd insisted. "The helping people part and the family part." She'd been right. The photo captured everything they'd become. Catherine in coveralls with a grease smudge on her cheek, Jack in a crisp Miller and Pierce polo, Emma proudly displaying her junior mechanic badge. Professional and personal, polished and practical, all the supposed contradictions that had turned out not to be contradictions at all. "Nearly ready," Emma called through the doors. Outside, half the town was gathering for the celebration. Tables, loaded with Pierre's pies, lined the parking lot, and Mrs. Henderson was setting up a display of tornado photos, a testament to Pine Grove's history of weathering storms together. The newest addition to her collection showed Richard Pierce, at last month's Father's Day dinner, teaching Emma how to change oil while wearing one of his $1,000 suits. He'd never fully embraced small-town life, but he was learning. Love had a way of changing people, one Sunday dinner at a time. "Remember what you said that first day?" Jack asked, coming up behind Catherine and sliding his arms around her waist. "About antiques being witnesses to history?" Catherine smiled, leaning back against him. "Hard to forget anything about that day. Well, look what Emma found in the garage this morning." He held out a familiar string of pearls, her mother's necklace, lost in the tornado that had brought them together. Emma had discovered the last missing pieces while helping clean out an old filing cabinet. "She wants to know if she can wear it for the ceremony," Jack said softly. "Says it's like having all our stories in one place." Catherine felt tears prick her eyes. "Our very own family artifact." Speaking of artifacts, Emma bounded in, carrying a large scroll. "The plans are ready." She proudly unrolled the architectural drawings for the center's new educational wing. At 9 years old, she'd appointed herself the project's creative director, insisting that every safety shelter should have space for puzzles and art supplies. "In case people have to stay a while," she'd explained, like how Catherine stayed after the tornado and found her way home. The portrait watched over them as they reviewed the plans together, their heads bent over Emma's careful additions. In it, they were smiling at something outside the frame, caught in a moment of shared joy rather than posed perfection. Through the lobby windows, they could see Pine Grove's Main Street, still familiar but subtly transformed. The hardware store now hosted community classes in its upper room. Pete's shop had expanded to include a training program for local youth, and the diner served $2 pie alongside Catherine's attempts at fancy Chicago desserts. "Time to start," Mrs. Henderson called from outside. "Everyone's waiting." They walked out together into the Oklahoma sunshine, Emma between them wearing the restored pearl necklace. The gathered crowd applauded, not just for the safety center's success, but for everything it represented. For a town that had chosen to grow without losing itself, and for a family that had found each other in a tornado's wake. "Ready?" Jack squeezed Catherine's hand. She looked at their family portrait through the lobby doors one last time, at the three people who had become exactly who they were meant to be, together. "Ready," she said, and stepped forward into their next chapter, held safe in the love that had turned out to be the strongest shelter of all.